And so, yeah, I'm just going to share a little bit about Gulu's background. And he has such a unique background. That's why we just constantly ask him back. Um, he is a mindfulness and Dharma teacher who also practices corporate real estate law. And he's making a call right now. Look at, like, he's got a corporate law. I'm joking. So yeah, he has such a cool background because he also practices law still, and he was exposed to meditation as a child, but he really found his own practice after law school when he was working at high-powered law firms, and found work to be extremely stressful, which I know many of us can relate to, stress from work and other things in our lives. So Gulu is deeply inspired to share meditation as an antidote to stress, a path to well-being, and a way to inject more sanity, compassion, and wisdom into the world, at least our little corner of the world. And yeah, it's so needed and appreciated. So, Gulu, thank you for being with us today. And yeah, I think that's all. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Gulu.
Hey, thanks, Madeline. Nice to be here with everyone. Unexpectedly, but it's a great joy. Let's dive in. An hour is not much time. Let's finding a posture that can support both wakefulness and a sense of rest. For many of us, the sense of rest is associated with sleep, but can we have a posture that's evokes a sense of restfulness, a sense of resting, while also being wakeful? And then there's a movement of mind. The Buddha called it vitakka. It's a skillful thought, a directed thought that brings us into presence. Maybe you have a word that helps you, like here or now or this moment. Or maybe it's just the ineffable movement of mind from being aware but kind of on autopilot to actually being aware and being aware that you're aware. And letting that quality of awareness rest on the body to receive whatever sensations are present. Including the sense of support from the floor and your chair and your seat. You might notice sensations that are pleasant, sensations that are unpleasant, some that are neither. And you might just notice the attitude of the mind. Maybe generally resistant or open, scattered or more focused, without any judgment. Just how is the mind in this moment? Kind of inventory. And then bringing this same movement of mind to notice the beginning of the inhale. And directing the attention on the breath and then sustaining that attention, feeling, receiving the experience of the cycle of breath, letting it register more deeply. The movement of mind that brings us into presence is very quick. So most of the meditation is this receptive mode of just receiving the rise and fall of the belly or the chest, or wherever you register that you're breathing. And when the mind inevitably wanders, as it does, that's actually the moment you notice that the mind has wandered is a kind of special, almost magical moment. One moment you're lost in thought, lost in some kind of trance of thought. And then the next moment, something shifts and you're found. It's kind of an awakening, actually. So we can learn to celebrate that moment, revere that moment. I've trained myself to smile at the recognition that the mind is doing its thing. And then just beginning again, developing kind of loyalty or devotion to this process of beginning again, directed thought that brings us into mindfulness, and then receiving the experience of this moment of breathing. And don't have to make anything happen. The effort can be gentle and relaxed. Oh, there's nowhere to go, nothing you have to get or get rid of, no one you have to be or become. Truly, just to be alive is enough. We can connect with the aliveness of this body through the breath that keeps us alive. So, keeping it simple, breathing in, receiving the in breath, breathing out, receiving the out breath. Everything else more or less fades into the background. And when you notice that the attention has wandered, maybe smiling at the recognition, and then beginning again without any scorecard, a completely new moment, as if this were the beginning of the meditation period. As we come to the end of our meditation period, inviting you to bring something or someone to mind that you are grateful for. Imagining this in your mind's eye, and if it's a person or another being, feeling into the sense of being in their presence. And then connecting with gratitude like a felt sense in the body. Noticing where gratitude resides. Noticing the uplift of a feeling of gratitude. And maybe even allowing this sense of gratitude to expand and pervade more and more of the body. I'll invite you to listen to the sound of the bell. Okay. Yeah, moving the body in any way that is supportive to get comfortable. If you're at all able and it's not an imposition, I'd love to see more of you on the screen. So last week, I talked about wise effort, and it was mainly in the context of this sort of, I'm going to share a slide with you, this sort of idea of the optimal amount of energy or effort that we apply in our practice or in our life. And this is often told in the story of Sona, the lute player, who was overstriving in his practice. He was dedicated to awakening, and he was working really hard, and it wasn't working for him. So he came to the Buddha for some advice, and the Buddha said, you're a lute player. What happens when the string is too tight? Do you get a good tone? And Sona says, no. It says, what about if the string's too loose? Don't get a good tone. So this led to the idea of the middle way, some sense of balance between overexertion and underexertion. And, the Buddha famously overdid it. He practiced in a way where he was just eating one morsel of food, and at one point he thought breath was overindulgent, so he was trying to breathe as little as possible, and this was not sustainable. He realized there has to be a better way, and found that better way, which is the middle path between extreme asceticism and overindulgence. And so that's one way we talk about wise effort. There's another way we talk about wise efforts, which is the 4 wise efforts, or the 4 wise endeavors, ways we can use our energy moment by moment in terms of practice. And these are rendered in different ways, but I like the acronym PACE, P-A-C-E, because you can pace your efforts. And So this stands for preventing unwholesome states of mind from arising, abandoning unwholesome states that have arisen, cultivating wholesome states, and extending them. So by wholesome, we generally mean states that lead to the alleviation of suffering for myself and others. And by unwholesome, the reverse. In the teaching about, this comes from the teaching about wise view, where Sariputra, the foremost disciple of the Buddha, teaching the monks, he said you can divide your experiences, states of mind primarily he's talking about, into these two categories, and define them primarily using an ethical framework. As many of you recognize, the 5 lay precepts are in here: not killing, not stealing, not abusing sexuality, speaking wisely. And there's a kind of a teaching that the Buddha gave to his son Rahula, where he said, before you do something, contemplate, will this lead to the alleviation of suffering for myself and others, or will this contribute to the suffering of myself and others? And if it causes suffering, he says to his 7-year-old son, don't do it. And then while you're doing the thing, evaluate, is this leading to my own liberation and liberation of others, or is this causing suffering? And if it's causing suffering, you pivot, you stop doing it. The quite common experience, if you end up hanging around Buddhist teachers or devout practitioners, where someone will start to say something, and then they'll say, well, maybe I'm not sure that's wise speech, and then they'll just stop, and the suspense is agonizing. But there's also a kind of a sense of like, someone's practicing and I'm going to respect that, not egg them on into what they've determined is unwise speech. There's another list that the Buddha gives of wholesome actions or wholesome states of being. And what I love about Buddhist practice is there's some concept, or there's like foundational principle, that all of these things can be cultivated. They can be strengthened, they can be developed. I used to think that people had a sort of like base amount of kindness that they got, from birth and the environment that they lived in. But no, you can actually cultivate kindness. I've seen it in myself and many other people. Can cultivate patience, cultivate using your energy wisely, and so on. So 4 wise efforts is, let me show that slide again. The 4 wise efforts is kind of a taking stewardship moment by moment, actually looking to see, what is my state of mind? Is this state of mind wholesome or unwholesome? And then coming into some agency where we can actually change the channel. We can shift in some way. So I undertook a practice probably a couple of years ago, where I made a vow that I would not complain, because I just noticed that tendency, I feel like aversive tendency. Lawyers, problem solvers of any kind have that. It's got we can kind of see what's wrong, and often the mind goes to what's wrong. So I noticed that I was just complaining a lot, and it didn't feel like, when I would feel that state of mind, if it's just aversive, not liking the way something is. I was usually good humored about it, but it seemed like a bad mental pattern. So I took a vow, I'm not going to complain. And the practice was, I enlisted people in my community to if they noticed that I was complaining, they just offer a prompt, is that a complaint? And then I would be, forced to not complain about that, but also investigate, is this a complaint? And over time, I very rarely complain out loud. And now the task shifts to, the much more difficult thing of identifying those aversive thoughts when they appear in the mind stream. It's actually not that hard to change a mood or I used to think it was sort of like you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, you just be on the wrong side of the bed all day. That's just kind of how it is. But this person took it down, or I was going to share it with you, but there was a YouTube video that was on my bookmark page, and it was a video of a sloth sitting in a recliner with a cat in front of it. And, sloths, they're very gentle creatures, but they have these very ominous claws. The sloth was using its ominous claws to very gently stroke the cat. And you could hear the cat purring very loudly. It's the silliest thing, the simplest thing. And without fail, if I were ever grumpy, 15 seconds of that video and I'm in a whole new mind frame. Gratitude practice has also been very, very helpful in this practice of wise effort to balance the mind, to remember what Thich Nhat Hanh called the joy of the non-toothache. That there's quite a lot of moments where there isn't really a problem. And often in those moments we get a little bored, or we zone out, or we pick up our phone, or the mind gets engaged in something. But to actually learn to savor those moments that might be simple, but are also kind of peaceful. I think the biggest challenge, we could talk a lot about how do you let go of things, and there's a lot to say about that. And every time you practice meditation, you're practicing letting go. You let go of whatever the other thing is you might be doing, scrolling or engaging with people, whatever else you did. You picked an alternative. There's some renunciation just to make the time to sit and practice. And then the mind will incessantly deliver you things to think about, to ponder, to grapple with. And the kind of the core of the practice is seeing those and letting them go, seeing those and letting them go, seeing those and letting them go. So in a very real way, the whole practice is cultivating this ability to let go. Sometimes I find that, if like a aversive mood comes up, or I'm a little angry or irritated or agitated about something, there's something alluring about that. Like you maybe get a little energy boost, or a little adrenaline kicks into the system. And the Buddha acknowledged this. I don't know if it's the Buddha or the commentaries, but somewhere in the Buddhist literature, the anger is called an arrow with a honey tip and a poison root. The honey tip is very alluring, and sometimes we can get seduced by that allure, and if you have training like I do, you just start compiling all the arguments in favor of that view. And then you're down a road, leading to more and more aversion, less and less peace. Recognizing the drawbacks of that is very helpful. And I think the hardest thing, and this is the skill of changing, I like to say changing the channel, because it kind of feels like you can just change the channel, is not as elusive as really like just remembering to do it. Like all of these things in practice, mindfulness, the word we use for mindfulness comes from the Pali word sati, which means to hold in mind or to recollect. So can we remember in moments where we feel that the mind is moving in an unwholesome direction? Can we remember to pause? Maybe we take a breath. Maybe there's some re-regulation that we need to do. And then it's a sort of beginning again with pointing in a different direction, having a different attitude. And this is a little bit of a contrast between a large dimension of practice is learning to accept this moment as it is without needing to add something or needing to take something away, to develop a kind of equanimity that's not dependent on conditions. And this is imperative because most conditions are outside our control. Can be very at odds with the state of the world in general, and lots of specific things I could point to. But this just causes suffering. If I'm quarreling with how in my mind, I shouldn't be this way, or how can people be like this? Well, they are like this. So that quarrel, I do the things I can to change the world, but that quarrel with reality is just causing agitation and misery for myself. So we spend a lot of time learning to just accept, to relax, to soften, to receive. And in the Four Wise Efforts, it's kind of like we're balancing that out with a sense of agency, that we do the one thing that we can easily learn to control is our state of mind. Maybe the last thing I'll say is that I sort of, my practice started in this tradition at Spirit Rock almost 20 years ago. It'll be 20 years ago in May, and very much the attitude of relax, soften, receive whatever's hindering you, learn from it. A lot of admonition about trying to manipulate your experience. And maybe I think Four Wise Efforts is maybe underemphasized, probably reasons for that. But I went to a retreat with the Venerable Bhikkhu Analayo. And in his retreat, he says, this is like paraphrase, but the timing is about right. Place your attention on your body as the body rests on the earth. Remove the hindrances. And then it's like a beat of like 5 seconds. Feel the joy of an unhindered mind. And it's, he's a convincing guy. So, something to contemplate, where can we really have like an incredible meditative development where we just have like stewardship of the mind. We can direct the mind where it makes more sense in any moment. So let's pause there and let those words settle for a moment. And then I would love to hear from any of you for any comments or any questions, reflections.
This is Susan. I thought that was very, very powerful, and it really consolidates, in a nutshell, a lot of the practices that I've been currently working on with an awakening joy class that I'm taking. So I'm, everything from mindfulness to gratitude to, just embracing what is. And, someone said right now it's like this.
Yeah.
And I have these little Post-its right here on my computers with all these, and it's great. And I wish I could figure out a way to remember it more times during the day, not just when I'm with you here. So if you could address that, that would be great.
Yeah, that's the thing. how do we remember? I've gotten to spend some time with James, and he's so good at, taking in what's being communicated and then lifting it up in some way or elevating it in some way or showing a different perspective in some way. I think we remember by just we keep forgetting, and then we remember that we forgot. Also, spiritual friends, being in communities like this. Kalyana Mita is actually play on words. Kalyana means beautiful, Mita means friend. So it can mean beautiful friends, which is usually what we mean. Or it can mean befriending the beautiful, which is very much the practice of the Four Wise Efforts, is that we are training the mind to more move into the direction of what's beautiful.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Mare.
Hi, Gullu. It's really
Hi.
you. It's been a long
Yeah.
time. I really appreciate this set, and I really need it. And I wanted to ask a question that may be a little heavy.
Sorry?
I'm Iranian American. We're kind of in a state of war right now, and I'm trying to understand the practice of wise speech and wise in the context of a situation like this, where the speeches that we're hearing are not just triggering for us, but they're going against our core values.
Yeah.
How do we both practice and really adopt the practices that you shared, but do them in a way that doesn't disregard that our triggers are actually natural?
Yeah.
That they're going against our core values.
Yeah.
That's this.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think, my take is that, when we're in times of crisis, and, there's no question that this is a time of crisis for people that are connected to that part of the world, maybe crisis for all of us. My approach is to practice more stewardship of what I'm taking in. Like in times of crisis, it feels like a time to cloister, to be secluded, to be with people that you care about, that share your values, and retreat yourself from the caustic dialogue of the world in whatever way you can. Media is the simplest way. Can we titrate in our engagement of that? Or if there are people in our lives, to spend less time with them or change the relationships. Because there's an inevitable energetic process of like just grasping what's happening and then being able to grieve it. That I think almost has to happen before we can start realigning our how we want to relate to the world. It's like, to me, feels more urgent, and everything we want to practice, any attribute we want to cultivate, whether it's wise speech or more patience or more loving kindness, we start to do that by noticing when it's absent, to really paying attention to that moment. Somebody says something and we feel ill will towards them because of what they said, to really tune into that moment, because that's the teacher. We see the disadvantageousness of that moment when we feel, oh, this is a moment of suffering. And more moments of tuning in to suffering. This is the Buddha's seminal teaching, Four Noble Truths. There's suffering, and suffering is to be known. We're beginning to recondition ourselves where, we just don't even want to go down those roads anymore. We see clearly. It's like you touch a stove, hopefully only do that once. And then you realize this is not going to do that. That with these patterns that we have, we get motivation for them to change by noticing those moments. And sort of coming around to believe that we don't have to do much else. That more and more moments of awareness just leads to the arising of wisdom. Sayadaw U Tejaniya says you mindfulness gathers data, and then that data gets processed on other levels of your being. So it's a very difficult time. And so a lot of care, bringing a lot of care to yourself and others is, I think, the first order. And then, we practice with where it's difficult, and we practice because we know it'll be difficult. Yeah, I'm wishing everyone that you're connected with will be safe and held. These are heavy times, We're just in heavy times, and it's largely because the world has not practiced this teaching, We're cultivating things that are wholesome. Mostly what the world seems to be cultivating is greed, hatred, and delusion. And then, we see the effects of that. It's so clear, unmistakable. And for me, the biggest act of social resistance we can do is to root those energies out of ourselves, strand by strand. So we become our inner world starts reflecting what we want to see in the outer world. Any last comment, reflection? An hour goes by pretty fast. So I've got a couple of things coming up. Maybe Madeline can share that.
Yeah, exactly. I was just leaving a little tiny space for anyone who wanted to make a last closing remark. But Gullu, thank you so much for being with us today. We're really lucky. We really appreciate you. And I do want to just mention that the Lunchtime Mindfulness is offered freely in the spirit of generosity, and the teachers are paid a very small stipend. But if you have benefited from this practice, you are invited to offer donations, or dana, which offers generosity back to the teachers. And anything you are able to offer is gratefully received by the teachers. We appreciate that. I did put a link in the chat right now with Gulu's Venmo, PayPal, his website, if you wish to reach him there, and also links to the 2 upcoming retreats we have with Gullu at Big Bear Retreat Center, which are going to be fabulous.
And just to add, the Coming Home to Our Senses retreat is hybrid. So if you can't make it to BBRC, home practice is wonderful because you're infusing wherever you are with that energy.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really helpful. That's true. Next week on Lunchtime Mindfulness, we will have Enrique with us, who's very fun, Enrique Colazo. And so please join us next Wednesday at noon. And any dedication of merit or anything you'd like to share with us, Gullu?
Yeah, may the fruits of this time together, the positive karmic impacts of practice and sharing community with Sangha ripple out into the wider world. We practice for ourselves, but ultimately we practice for the benefit of all living beings everywhere without any exception.
Yeah, thank you so much. So if folks wish to come off mute and put your voice in the room, say hello and goodbye to each other. We'd love to hear from you.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Gullu.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you all next
See
week,
ya.
hopefully. I think someone's speaking, but it's a little bit muffled, so apologies if we can't hear you. All right, thank